Chad Carson, welcome to the show, brother.
It is great to be here, Justin. Thank you.
Well, before I introduce you, let's start off with a little bit of a story. Tell us about 2007 when you totally overreached in your real estate endeavors.
Yeah, so a little background. I was 23 years old when I started. I got out of college. That was 2003. And so I have a business partner. He and I got into this business from the very beginning. And most people think about real estate investing with just buying a rental property on the side. Like we were all in. We were like flipping houses, buying properties. Like my day-to-day job, 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. sometimes was going out looking for properties, finding good deals, flipping them. So that's kind of the background here. And in 2007, so we've been in business for several years at that point, we really finally started hitting our stride, like in terms of buying properties. We were buying a lot of properties. In fact, when it came to this story, we had already bought 32 properties in 1 year. So 2007, and everybody knows now, looking back, what happened in 2008, 9, and 10, and how brilliant that was to be buying that many properties right before the biggest recession or the biggest economic downturn since the Great Depression. But we did that. And most of them were good deals. Most of them we flipped and made a lot of money on. We bought some rental properties. But this particular property that I screwed up on was a bankruptcy auction, actually. So it wasn't my bankruptcy. It was somebody else's losing their property. This was an apartment owner, and he had not fixed up the property. And because of that, he just didn't have good tenants, and he just had some other stuff going on. And he contacted me off some of my marketing, like a letter I think I sent him. And he said, I'm going to bankruptcy court this week. There's an auction. They're going to be bidding my properties. And, I would love, can you help me out? Like if you bought the properties, then maybe I could buy them back or something. And when somebody comes up with that kind of story, even though you're sympathizing with it, it's like, I don't know that I can help this. I can help, but I went to the bankruptcy auction. I'd never been to this type of auction. This is something new for me. I've bought a lot of properties, but it's basically a courtroom, and there's a bankruptcy judge up there in front of you, like up in the seat. And so you're already kind of getting nervous. I was, because you're in this like weird environment. And it's also this emotional situation with the seller wanting me to help him out. And he was sympathetic to that. And then there's only one other bidder who came to this auction. This is another investor who I kind of knew a little bit, had a reputation around town as buying a lot of properties. And he actually pulled me aside before this auction and did something which is illegal, by the way, and said, hey, I see you're going to bid on this property. Why don't we just wink, wink, make a deal. And then that way we get it at a lower price. And then, we can split the property afterwards or something like that. So for those who don't know, that's basically like colluding to change the result of an auction. You can't do that. That's illegal, especially at a bankruptcy auction. And I told him, basically go to hell. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to buy this property. And so I had, number one, I'd been buying a lot of properties. It was really busy that year. Number two, had this emotional situation. This guy wanted me to help him out. Number three, I'm kind of pissed off because this other guy is trying to do something illegal and be competitive with me. And that was everything leading up to me going and bidding on this property. And the long story short, I bid well past my target number for this multi-unit apartment. It was a 7-unit apartment, multifamily, kind of multiple buildings. And he was bidding, the other investor was bidding, I was bidding, back and forth. And all of a sudden I woke up and realized I had just bid, I think it was $220,000 for this property when my number was like 190 or something like that. And the judge is like, congratulations, you win the property. I'm like, oh crap, like what did I just do? And I'll fast forward this story because there's a lot more details. But the point was, this was like the end of 2007. We bought that deal. We had to kind of scramble. My business partner's like, Chad, what did you get us into? Like, this is, what are you doing? But we scrambled. We came up with the money from a local bank and from our prior kind of sources of money. We bought the deal. We ended up renting it, eventually selling it, making a little bit of money. But it was it was kind of a stressful cherry on top of that 2007 Sunday, which was exciting, up and down. And the moral of the story for us is we got in over our head. Like I was in this ethos of go big, buy a bunch of properties, more is better. And that was sort of the wake up call for me to say, all right, Chad, you need to slow down and think about like, what are you doing? What are you trying to accomplish financially? What about all the stress and time and anxiety this kind of business model is causing you? And I'm happy to go into some of that, kind of those aha moments. But that particular situation was pretty crazy.
Yeah. Trial by fire, and definitely a great learning opportunity, right?
Absolutely. It was.
Did you say you purchased 32 properties in a year? Is that what I heard?
Yeah, 32 closings. So like we went to a closing table to buy a property 32 times, but sometimes like one particular closing, for example, was 7 houses. Like we bought 7 houses, flipped them to somebody else. So I mean, we were just like busy, busy, busy buying a lot of properties. It was a totally different approach than what I do now, which is, hey, buy 1 or 2 properties per year, sell a property here and there. A little bit more the tortoise than the hare now, but that sprint, that like sprint up the mountain is what I call it. The sprint up the real estate mountain was really kind of my learning lesson on kind of owning my own approach to real estate, which I like. I like traveling slowly. I like, having slow meals. I just lived in Spain for a year. Like I enjoy like conversations. Slowness is great these days. I enjoy that. I try to convince people to go a little slower. That was not what I was doing at that point. It was complete opposite.
Yeah, you and I are totally aligned. I'm all about really just expanding time and like sinking into the experiences of life, because
Yeah,
that's where the richness is. If you're just like racing constantly, which there's no problem with like some sprinting
yeah,
at times in order to get to new levels, but I think the true richness of life is often found when we actually slow down and become present to what we're doing in that particular moment and where we're at in our life, in that part of our
yeah.
life.
Yeah, I mean, I think richness number one, also learning. So, I mean, like learning happens when you have space in between. Like, if you don't take a breath to like learn from your real estate deals in this case, but really anything like your job, your relationship, like if you don't pause and listen to what's happened in that situation, there's not a lot of learning going on. And that was probably the biggest negative for me in that year in 2007, was not learning from what happened. I bought a bunch of properties, I did a bunch of activity, but I didn't learn the lessons until 1 or 2 years later, when like the real effects of what I just did actually came to bear.
Well, before we dive too deep, I'm going to actually introduce you. So, Chad Carson, also known as Coach Carson online, he's the author of the newly released book, The Small and Mighty Investor. And he's also the podcast host of Real Estate Investing with Coach Carson. I've personally been following his journey pretty much since about 2018. I've kind of sat on the sidelines for the most part with real estate investing, but with this release of this book, The Small and Mighty Investor, I'm really starting to formulate kind of my personal plan of how I want to layer more real estate into my own personal, wealth journey. And so I'm super excited to have Coach Carson on the show and really dive into two different aspects. One, kind of how do you get into real estate if you're starting from zero? You're not financially independent. You're kind of at like a zero net worth or a lower net worth. So that's like going to be one aspect of the show. The second aspect of the show is, say you're like pretty far along on your financial independence journey, or maybe you're even financially independent. How do you then layer in real estate to create an opportunity for you to generate even more wealth in a way that adds more life to your life? And
Yeah,
one of the things I love most about Coach Carson's book is his philosophy around money and life. And his guiding principle is life first, which just saying that gives me goosebumps and makes me like feel super excited and privileged to have Coach Carson on the show to really kind of dive into what that means for both the beginner investor in real estate, as well as someone who's kind of far along on their financial independence journey. So before we dive into those two aspects, there is a thing that I really want to cover with you, Coach Carson, because it's something that comes up a lot in my work with my coaching clients, and everyone wants passive income. And there's this idea that like once you get like passive income, like it, I think there is almost like I don't want to call it a myth, but there is a nuance that is not understood about passive income. And I think you are one of the best peoples I could talk to about that journey to passive income. So could you lay the groundwork for us in like how you see and view passive income?
Yeah, it's one of the reasons I got into real estate in the first place. And real estate's not the only place to get income. So like I love the diversity of different financial independence tools you can use. And by the way, I'm a index fund investor myself as well. I've dabbled in some other things, and my kind of very small part of my portfolio, I invest in like a couple startups that I'm really into, and also some Bitcoin kind of stuff. So I dabble in other stuff, but real estate and index funds are my kind of core things. But passive income, I want to like separate two different ideas that I think are all kind of wrapped up in passive income. And the first is something called recurring income. And if you think about a rental property, like to me, the core fundamental of the entire concept of investing in real estate is this idea that you own a property, and that property has someone who leases it from you. And the kind of most basic example is you have a house, somebody lives in the house, they pay you rent every month for the privilege of living in the house and getting to have that be their place. That monthly income comes in month by month by month. And of course, there's small situations where somebody loses a job or they can't pay. But if you screen your tenants well, you buy good properties, most of the time you're going to get that money coming in. And compare that recurring income to a job income, and I'm like, or an entrepreneurial income, or like if you're a salesperson, you're having to go and sell something to get income. You have to actively go out and do something, add value to somebody continuously on a day-to-day basis, which is fine. Like that's the way jobs work. That's the way employment works. But that's a different concept than buying a property, an asset, giving it to somebody to live in, having a contract with them, and then them agreeing to pay you for the next 12 months, 2 years. I have some properties people have lived in for 5 or 10 or longer, 10 years or longer. I know my dad's in rental properties, and other mentors I have been in the business for 5 decades. They've had people who stayed in houses for 20 or 30 years. So recurring income, like the point here is, it's something that you do some work on the upfront, a bunch of work on the upfront. That's not passive. It's not passive at all, actually, buying a rental property. But then over time, that recurring income keeps coming in without you having to put in the same amount of effort you did upfront. There's always some maintenance work ongoing. But I think that recurring income is the core concept. And it may or may not be passive along the way. You might manage that property yourself, which would be less passive than, say, hiring a property manager, which is mainly what I do these days. I mainly have a property manager manage most of my properties. But so there's kind of a spectrum of passivity. But rental properties, even if you're managing it all yourself, that's much less passive than going and working a day job and having to go earn a salary. So like that's part one of what I want to compare it to. But then part two is, you can then do work by buying certain types of properties, by hiring a team, like I talked about, like a third party manager, by building systems. And a lot of what I talk about in the book, I have a couple chapters on systems and processes and team. And if you build all that in and you buy the right, like not all properties are equally passive. So some properties are much less passive because people move in and out a lot. There's just a lot of headaches and maintenance, whereas some properties are super easy to manage. And the ultimate kind of goal for me, and kind of where I am and my business partner has been for the last 4 or 5 years, is that it takes a couple hours per week for me to manage the manager, to do some bookkeeping, to check on things, to manage a lot of properties that produce 100% of my financial independence income. So that recurring income that I just talked about, it continues to come in every single month, and it requires 2 hours per week. So is it completely passive? No, it's not completely passive, but it's passive enough. Like that doesn't limit me from traveling to Spain. It doesn't limit me from doing anything else in my life that I want to do. And I think that's the core message: is that number one, find investments that have recurring income. Number two, find investments that can eventually be passive enough for you to do whatever you want to do.
I love that. So, question for you, digging into the nuance of creating passive or easily manageable recurring revenue or income. When you first got into real estate, or let's say someone's first getting into real estate and they want to develop that recurring income, what kind of hours can they expect kind of in that initial accumulation phase?
Yeah, I would say on a very part-time basis, if you don't have at least 5 hours per week, although I'd prefer like 10 hours per week, on that during the first kind of that load up phase. And the load up phase is meaning you've got to, number one, learn how to do this stuff, because this is like riding a bike. This is like speaking a foreign language. Like real estate has its own vocabulary, it has its own set of analysis tools. And so you got to learn it just like you learn anything else. It's not rocket science. I'll tell you that. That's kind of the nice thing about real estate. The math is simple. The concepts of understanding a property and if it's a good location, a bad location is not rocket science. Like this is stuff that you already know. And it's pretty easy to help you figure it out because you've already lived in. We've all lived in houses, like we've all lived in apartments. We've all lived in some neighborhood that we're like, oh, this is a great neighborhood. I love this neighborhood. And so all we have to do is kind of tease out the knowledge we already have in our head about locations and quality, and then numbers and math. Like so, it's easy stuff, but you do have to learn that. And then there's also you got to build relationships. You got to build a team. So there is work on the front end to actually build that passive income. But 5 to 10 hours per week, I kind of tell people sort of a minimum that you could do. And you're still going to have to leverage other people's time. You have to probably hire a real estate agent, hire a property manager to help you out. But if you had more time than that, like if I have students who have been like a part-time firefighter, for example. Maybe they did firefighting 3 days a week, and they had another, the rest of the week to just do real estate. Like that's brilliant. Like that gives you a ton of time to do it. But even if you don't, I have a doctor in Southern California that I've worked with. He is an emergency room doctor. So when he's on, he doesn't look at his cell phone. He doesn't do anything related to his business. But when he's at home, he hires people long distance to help do a lot of stuff. And he's bought like 8 or 9 properties from LA and another part of the country. So, I mean, anything in between there is possible, but real estate is less passive on the front end than an index fund, like where you can just press a button and buy something. And there's a ton of benefits that I think can make it worth your while to do it. But you kind of have to look at your time and if you're in a period of your life where you have like, I have zero time, like I couldn't even afford an hour to do it each week. Just put real estate on the back burner. Like, wait until you do have time.
I love that. That's really helpful, I think, because I know a lot of people, one of the kind of myths that I work to kind of break is that like you should quit your job and just like go all in on XYZ, whether it's a entrepreneurial endeavor or real estate or any, your passion. And I actually think like a 9 to 5 or a part-time job is like an incredible opportunity for a couple things. One, income that you can use to invest in real estate or the stock market or something else. And then two, it really gives people the basically paid uh, learning opportunity. Like
Yeah.
you can learn so much in all types of job, whether that's managing a team, which you're going to have to do if you want to have like a mostly passive real estate portfolio. You're going to have to learn how to build systems in any job, especially as you move up within any company. You're going to have to understand how do you create systems and processes that empower you to be more efficient and more productive in your work. And that is the same skill set that you're going to need in real estate to make real estate to a point where, like Chad, you're literally working 2 to 4 hours a week, which in my mind is like, that's fucking amazing. Like, I
Yeah.
know through, listening to your interviews on other shows, like, you're pretty much at or from my understanding, you're kind of at that fat fire level where you have, 120,000 coming in a year, and that is just money you get to live off of. Pay for your year abroad in Spain, and pay for rich experiences in your life. So I always like to encourage people, like, fucking, even if you hate your day job, you should love your day job because it's a paid learning opportunity. And then you
Yeah.
can harness or leverage that experience into something like real estate.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think for all the reasons you said, it's like I encourage people to do the same thing. And I would also add that when you get into real estate, or really even if you were starting another business, because real estate is a business, I think it's one of the more passive businesses you could create. It's easy to make it passive, but I mean, you could have other businesses, and you probably should. I love starting businesses, but what I've learned from working with other people and seeing other people's real estate investing journeys or financial independence journeys is not all of us have like different entrepreneurial kind of stuff. Like, entrepreneurs have the most entrepreneurial of people are risk takers. Like they're the people who jump out of the airplane with the parachute, and they got it in their hand and they're going to put the parachute on as they're free falling, right? Like those are entrepreneurs. They're like, I'll figure it out. Man, I'll get it done. And that's like the extreme. On the other extreme are people who are like, I don't even want to get near an airplane. Like, don't even want to think about that. Like, you need to have like a glide path to get down really, really safely. And so you need to know like where you are, and having a day job where you produce income is like the safety blanket. That's like the airplane that's going to take you down. And if you don't want to be like a daredevil jumping out of airplanes, like that's some people like that. Like entrepreneurs are like a small percentage of the pure entrepreneurs are a small percentage of the population. I think that's my read on it. And so if that's not you, if you're like very risk averse, keep that day job as long as you can until you can then replace it with the income from other stuff. And you'll know yourself. Like you'll know, like I have somebody I featured in the book named Anthony. He's a good friend of mine. He lives in Seattle. He, about 5 years into his journey, he was in a corporate job. He just knew that he's like, I'm done. Like I can't do this anymore. But he had this confidence about his entrepreneurial ability. He was like, I'm in the airplane. I got my parachute on. I'm out of here. Like he jumped before he had enough income from his real estate. And so he had to be confident that he could then produce it. And that pressure that he put on himself was actually a boost to him. Whereas some people, if they did that jumping out of the airplane, it would be like terrified and they'd freeze and they would crash, you know? And so like, that's where you just got to know when you're ready to jump, and whether you want to just walk down the steps of the airplane or whether you're willing to jump out. And either one is fine. Like there's no right or wrong there, but I guess this is just a long-winded way to say like 100%, like keep the day job, because that's like that's the security you have until you're ready to jump out of the airplane on your terms, when it's safe for you, when it makes sense for you. And it might be a year from now, it might be 5-10 years from now. Like it doesn't matter, but that's a big deal.
Yeah. And I absolutely love that, because what you're really encouraging the audience to do is have a level of self-awareness. Like, what is your risk tolerance? Is it super high? Can you I always like to think, one of the ways I think through risk tolerance is like, if everything went to shit, like, are you the person who's cool having like 1 month or 2 months of savings to live off of? Or are you the person who wants like 2 to 3 years? Like if you lost your job and the stock market crashed and everything went to hell, and then, or are you somewhere in between that? And then as you kind of feel through that, and I think COVID was a really great, learning opportunity for a lot of people, because I think it pushed people to understand what their risk tolerance was at. So for me, like I've always kept a huge emergency fund. So like when COVID hit, even though the stock market dropped like 40%, I was like, it's cool. I don't need to sell anything. Like if I, lose my like income source and the stock market stays down, like I have 2+ years to figure shit out. And that's more than enough time to like figure out a new income source, etc. But then I know people like who are like, yeah, I just need 3 months. Like I'm confident enough in myself. Like if anything went to hell, like I could figure it out in 3 months. And they're the type of person who like they keep 3 months in cash, and then everything else goes into the stock market or their entrepreneurial endeavor or real estate.
Yeah. Yeah. It's self-awareness, and it also changes over time. Like when I was started, like I was in a unique situation that it was just me. Like I wasn't even married. I didn't have anybody else who depended on me. Whereas, people listening to this are going to be at various situations. You might be a caregiver for a loved one, for a parent, or you might be a parent. And so like that totally changes your risk tolerance when you have somebody else who has to jump out of that airplane with you. They're like, all right, well, yeah, we better not jump out of the airplane yet. Let's have that 2 years of reserve so that I don't like ruin my kid's life or something. But it's a fun game. Like this is a game where you can listen to people like me and Justin, and you can get some of the kind of the tips, but then ultimately you're the one playing the game. Like you're the one on this field, and you're having to like navigate the rules, and every game's a little bit different. So you can't like put a prescription on your life and say, this is exactly how your journey is going to go. This is when you should get out. This is when you should, this is the formula you should use. Like, yes, those are helpful, but like ultimately you're the one who has to do a gut check and say, this is when I'm ready to say I'm financially independent. This is when I'm ready to leave my job. Like those are your decisions and nobody else gets to live with those except for you.
Yeah. And just to double click on that, essentially, like understanding not only awareness about your risk tolerance, but having an understanding and awareness of where you're at in your life. You know, do you have a wife? Do you have kids? Are you taking care of your parents? What are the, are you already like in a mortgage and all your money's like in your house and in a 401k that you can't access? And those are all different kind of aspects to, essentially kind of how hard and how fast you can go in terms of something like entrepreneurship or real estate. And, I think you would agree with me that like real estate is very much like an entrepreneurial type business endeavor. And you
Mm-hmm.
have to have some sort of entrepreneurial spirit in order to really enjoy real estate. Would you agree with
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, I agree. And I always tell people like real estate begins like a startup company. Like you're out in Bay Area, right? Like everybody knows like startup companies are like all in. You got to have a lot of time, you got to have a lot of energy, you got to have a lot of focus. And as I mentioned, 5 to 10 hours can still work with real estate, but you need to put in those 5 to 10 hours for a while. But then it's kind of cool is that real estate can end up like a blue chip stock. Like it can end up
Mm.
like this passive dividend producing, very much more passive stock. So it's kind of unique in that way. It begins one way, it ends another if you do it well. And so I think yes, it's entrepreneurial, but I found that people who get into real estate as opposed to like, and I say get into like the people I found who depend more on real estate, like on the front end, for example, and use it to generate financial independence, are a little bit more like control freaks. I'm pointing myself my fingers at me too. Like they like having an influence on the success. Like they thrive on that. They like it. The index fund thing, they understand that. That's great. But just having to sit on your hands and just use like self-discipline just to wait on that, it's like that's not my thing. And so I like to kind of balance out with index funds and have it be a diversification strategy. Whereas, so I found that to be pretty consistent with real estate investors, even people who get into it later, like you mentioned, like you've other investments and you just want to get into real estate to have a little bit more kind of control on the income streams, a little bit more control on the way you generate your wealth. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? But I think that control factor is like part and parcel of being an entrepreneur. Like we are control freaks, sometimes on the extreme, maybe obnoxiously extreme. But for better or worse, you need to be ready to be the center. You're the captain of your team. You're not you have a lot of other team members who have to help you out, but you're definitely the leader. You're definitely the one who has to make the shots and call the shots. And if you're not ready to do that, this real estate's not the right sport for you.
Yeah. So let's chat about somebody who, let's say, they have a 9 to 5 job. They have a stable source of income. What are kind of like some of the first steps that they should implement to start to build up their real estate, like as you called it, the load up phase? Like how do they start the load up phase?
Yeah, real estate starts with financial independence. It starts with the personal financial kind of fundamentals. So like real estate's kind of, you can think about it layers. Like your personal finance are the kind of foundational layer, and then you layer real estate investing on top of that. And so I don't think it's talked enough about in the real estate community. There's people who are like, well, I'm just going to get into real estate and that's going to solve all my financial problems. It's like, no, like whatever financial problems you have are going to go right with you. In fact, they're probably going to bring you down if you don't solve those. So what does that mean? That means having a reserve fund. Like I'm a big on having cash reserves like you are. And before you get into rental properties, like at a minimum, like you need to have 3 months of cash reserves set aside. I would say 6 months if you're really risk averse, 12 months or more. That's like your security blanket to allow you to take risks, to allow you to take chances, to have a fallback plan, because you shouldn't count on your money in real estate right off the bat. That's a really important metric. Like even if your property makes a cash flow, you should count on reinvesting that cash flow into other properties, into, having a reserve fund for your rental property, into paying off debt eventually, maybe. But you should just look at your real estate business as a separate entity that's not going to give you money for a while. You're just going to leave it all in there. And so you need to be resilient to the point where you can support yourself financially, and maybe even you might have to feed it a little bit here and there when you have some unknown kind of things. So you don't want to be in a desperate cash position personally on your finances and get into real estate. I think that's the point I want to make. But that doesn't mean you need to have a ton of cash. Like, I started with very little cash when I first started buying rental properties. And I don't know, would you want me to go into it, like maybe a couple ideas for people who are like either little cash or lower on cash? Because I think that's where I was when I first started. I was in a pretty stable place financially because I was flipping houses and I had some income, but I didn't have a lot of capital just to put like huge down payments. Like, I didn't have the 20% down payment on a $150,000 house. That would have been $30,000. I didn't have that. And so I had to get creative. And so I'm going to give you, like, there's two kind of main categories of ideas of ways you can get into real estate early on if you have less than a 20% down payment. One idea, which I love and what I did myself, is something called house hacking. So house hacking means turning your personal residence into kind of a hybrid quasi investment. House hacking. So house hacking has a lot of different flavors, which is really cool. But a kind of traditional house hack, which I did, was move into a multi-unit property. So typically like a 2-unit, 3-unit, a 4-unit property. And 4 units is important because once you get over 4 units, the financing options change. So if you're anything less than a 4-unit property, then you can get a traditional conventional financing, which in this case, when you're an owner occupant, means you could get into that property with 3.5% down for an FHA loan. So on a $100,000 property, that's $3,500 down instead of $20,000 down. I know there's no $100,000 properties out there, but kind of do the math, multiply that times 10 if you're in LA. But the point is, you can get in from a 3.5% down payment, or a 5% down payment, or a 10% down payment. Those are available to you when you live in the property. And so if you do that, you can save up. You can still have to save some money up, but it's a lot less than you would if you're going and buying a pure investment right off the bat. And so that's the financial aspect of it. That's pretty cool. You also get the lower interest rates, whatever the spectrum of interest rates are at this time, which they're higher in 2023. But owner occupants get the lowest interest rates because, from a bank's standpoint, when you live in the property, you're the lowest risk borrower, period. Because if you're an investor borrowing that property, like, if things go bad, you're going to let your rental properties go before you let your principal residence go, because you got to have a place to live. And bankers know that. So they just see that as a lower risk. You got more skin in the game. That's your home. So for all those reasons, lower down payment, better interest rates, better terms, a loan, it's a great strategy to move into a property. And then you get the benefit of learning as you go. As we talked about earlier, you can get this property, you move into it. You don't have to be an expert landlord. Like, when I first moved into my fourplex I was 24 years old. I didn't know anything about rental properties, but I met I used my enthusiasm and my hustle to kind of compensate where I didn't know what I was doing. And so I met my tenants. I told them, hey, I live in unit number 2. We're all in this together. I'm kind of new to this, but we're going to figure this out. I was honest with them. And these became like great friends. Like, I was in a college town. They were all grad students from other countries. Like, I had a Chinese couple who were studying math at Clemson University, where I went to school. So that was really cool. They would have these big cookouts and have these barbecues with all this different Chinese food that we got to eat. And that was amazing. And then we had another couple from Africa, from I think they were from Ivory Coast in Africa. And so totally different culture, and they were living in unit number 4. My Chinese friends were in unit number 1. And so it was amazing. Like, I had a great experience, and they paid me rent. They paid me rent that covered my mortgage expense, by the way. So I was basically living for free because I had the rent from those other 3 units coming in to pay my mortgage, taxes, insurance, and some of my maintenance on the property. It was beautiful. And not every house hack is going to be that good. It's going to depend on what you pay for it. It's going to depend on whether it's a 2-unit, 3-unit, or 4-unit. But the point is, for all those benefits, like, you can get into it lower money down, great long-term loan. You're learning as you go, and you can at least cover part of your mortgage payment, maybe all of it if you get a really good deal. Like, house hacking is amazing. Like, I think I'll pause if you have any other comments on that, Justin. But that's the first way that I've found to get into deals, if you're willing to do that, if it's possible, with a little bit less down payment.
Yeah, and that's where I think self-awareness and where you're at in life. So, if you're single, like fuck yeah, like house hack. Like if you don't have kids, house hack. If you're just like, starting in the workforce and you're kind of at that earlier part of your life stage, I think house hacking could be really awesome. And it's something my wife and I talked about during our initial foray into financial independence journey. And ultimately, we decided that what was better for us was just to stay in a smaller 2 bedroom home with a bathroom that was much lower in rent cost than like really anything available on the market, because we really valued time alone together. And if we were to, for example, do a house hack where we had, like, say, a 3 bedroom where someone is living in the house with us, that would just not be a rich lifestyle for us. That would be like our freedom, our independence, our time together and alone would be greatly hindered. So we could have gone to the triplex, duplex, fourplex option. But even that for us at the place in our life, just because we know each other, we didn't want to have to share a wall with tenants and just know that, like, that wasn't that peace and kind of like quiet and independence from other people wasn't available. So for us, it didn't make sense. But if I were to go start my financial independence journey all over again, and I was, just kind of, in my mid 20s when I was single, oh my God, I would have for sure done a duplex, triplex, or fourplex, because that would have like rocketed me to financial independence infinitely faster. And then I also know some couples who are totally okay being in a duplex or a triplex, or even renting out a room or their guest house. Like, for example, one of my clients, like, they rent out their guest house, and like for them, that's great. Another one of my clients, he's single and he rents out 3 of his bedrooms. And he lives in a fourth bedroom, and for him it's a way to like create massive amounts of equity really fast, because like they're paying his mortgage down for him.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. So definitely like know yourself. The other thing I would add is this is not a forever proposition. So like if this is something that you think, hey, for a period of my life, I could do this, like, hey, why not? Because there is no worthwhile result, whether it's in your fitness and your health or your finances or whatever, without some kind of like discomfort or change or whatever you want to call this. I found that the discomfort and the change was actually kind of fun, but like you gotta do something out of the ordinary in order to build wealth and get financial independence. So this is just one route, right? And I love the idea you mentioned of like renting a like a guest house out. I've known people that's sort of another alternative, especially in like if you're in California, some other places, or just places where there's a lot of single family houses, but not a lot of like duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes. That's just the nature of a lot of the United States. It's like unless you live in an older neighborhood or a college town or urban area, we don't build a lot of multi-units. We're single family house deserts, right? But a lot that's pretty cool in California, for example. My understanding is there's an ADU law that allows you by right to build ADUs in your backyard. And I'm not speaking from personal experience, just other people I know in California. So ADUs, accessory dwelling units, guest houses are a cool angle. Like, so if you can buy the property, put an ADU in, rent that out, or even I know people who live in the ADU and rent the house out. Like that's even more like gangster. If you want to go gangster with your financial independence, like all in. So that's an alternative. The other alternative, just to give you kind of some more angles for people to think about, is if you live in a house that you own that is a simple kind of could make a good rental itself. Most people when they kind of move up houses, they go from one house to another, they just sell the house, and that's just a kind of a knee jerk. That's just what they do, knee jerk response. You could keep that house though, especially if it makes sense as a rental property, and that could be your first rental. So that's kind of a form of house hacking, is just keep your house. Don't sell your house that you're living in, or buy a property that could become a good rental one of these days once you outgrow it. You live there for a couple of years, you still get the owner occupant loan, and then you keep that in your portfolio, and then move to another house and buy that second house. That's another way to get in, again, with lower money down. And you got to be scrappy when you're early in your real estate journey. Like there's no, like, it's just figuring out a way to get started. House hacking is one great way to do it. I'll add in a second way in addition to house hacking, because house hacking is one way I did it. The other way I had to get into it though was buying traditional real estate investments, so the 20% down, normal type investments, but partnering with other people who have the money to do the deal. And so there's lots of ways I could explain that, but just to get the concept, if you find a good deal, if you understand how to find real estate investments and how to run the numbers and how to look for properties, if you have the willingness to do that, if you have the time to do that, if you have the knowledge to do that, then there are tons and tons and tons of people in this world who have the cash and credit, who want to get into real estate, but don't have the time, the knowledge, the energy to do what you've just decided to do. And so that's a natural partnership, is to, for you as the, I call you like the entrepreneur, the real estate entrepreneur, to find the deal and then to bring in a passive partner, a money partner, to do the deal with you. And that was my, in addition to house hacking, that was like my number one way to get started. Was I had a professor at Clemson University where I went back to school because I was a biology major with a German minor. Like I had nothing to do with real estate. And so I was like, let me go take a few business classes before I do this. And I had a business professor, and he was a management 101, or so. I don't remember much about the class itself, but I remember this business professor, and he was talking about real estate investing, how he has some rental properties, and my kind of light bulb went off. I was like, oh, I'm going to go talk to this guy. And after class, I started talking to him. One thing led to another. I went out and rode around and looked at some of his properties. Fast forward about a year and a half when I finally started getting into real estate, and he was my first money partner on one of my very first deal that I did on my own. Was he put up the money, he went to the bank and got the loan, and we figured out a way to do the deal together. And my theory, my theme here that I want everybody to understand is, when you're new to real estate investing, think about like a deal like a big pie. Like let's say you're like going to a carnival, like a county fair or something, and you want this really big, pecan pie. I'm from the South. I like pecans. And if you have no money, you're going to get 100% of no pie. Like you got nothing. Like you're not going to eat any pie. But if you choose to split a pie with somebody else, isn't getting like 25% of the pie or even 50% of the pie and having some pie, like having a deal, better than getting zero and having nothing? Like, yes, all day long. Like you should always be willing to give up some of your deal to somebody else. So that's the idea. I'm happy to talk about like specific ways to partner and structure that, but those are the two ways that I got started: house hacking, using low money down kind of loans, and then partnering or finding money from other people who had already had the money, even though I didn't have it.
Yeah, and we'll let the audience read your book to get kind of some more strategies on how to leverage partnering. What I want to cover next is the person like myself who is financially independent and wants to get into real estate to, further kind of build more redundancy in their wealth. So how would someone like me, who's considering adding more real estate, like my brother and I, we own my mother's house that she lives in, and she rents out rooms in it, and it covers her cost of living, which is great because my mom doesn't have a 401k or anything like that. So basically that house covers her living expenses, which is perfect because then my brother and I don't need to pay out of pocket to manage or to support my mom in her twilight years. But I'm like, I have this opportunity where my brother, and just to give you some more color, because you can just use me as an example, my brother is fully proficient in construction. Like he can like build things, he can repair things, and he actually turned his garage into two or three Airbnb units. And like, so he's kind of, that's how he has gotten into real estate himself, is he just turned his garage into an Airbnb property. And where he lives in Washington during the summer, it's like he can make like a fuck ton, a bunch of extra money. Like I'm talking like 20, 30,000 extra dollars a year just off a few months of like Airbnb. So for someone like me, or me and my brother, what would you recommend and for us to like take this kind of like mini start that we both have in real estate, but then go further?
Yeah. So this is kind of a good segue from what we just talked about. And I'll take the position that you're in, Justin. Like, if you already have financial independence, or you already have a pretty good base of financial base, and you're in other investments, if you're deciding to get into real estate, you want to take a little bit different tact than somebody who's brand new to real estate and who doesn't have a lot of capital. Because like house hacking, like I just explained, that's an awesome way to start. You got to put some kind of equity in. It's either going to be sweat equity or real equity, right? Either way, like however you want to start as possible. In your case, like I don't think sweat equity is the best way to go. Although you could do that just to learn and maybe just kind of have some fun and just kind of get in the game. But consistently, you got other things going. You got a podcast. You got other businesses, and so you want to be passive with this thing. And so like you want to take the opposite position of the person who is just starting. Like the entrepreneur, they need somebody like you who's the passive person with the money. And so a general way to get in the business, I would say for you is like, number one, keep it passive. So how do you do that? Well, first of all, you could partner with other people. I think that's a great strategy. Like in your case with your brother, I think, getting into a partnership is, I've always heard people say this, like it's even more important to like know your partner and kind of have some like move slowly than even getting married. Like, because a business partner doesn't have all the other benefits of having a marriage partner. You're just in business. And when it goes bad, it goes like really bad. With that said, though, like I'm a big fan of partnerships. I've had my best decision I ever made in business was partnering with my business partner. Like he's amazing. Like he's a trustworthy person. He's smart. He's smart in a lot of different ways than I am. And so like we've compensated for each other, I think, over the years. Like I was more the negotiator, the communicator, finding deals, going out finding them. He was also good at deal making, but he was more like engineering kind of thinker, analytical, asked really good questions, and so we complemented each other really well. And it worked because we had similar goals and we had similar aspirations. And he was just a trustworthy person, and I'm hopefully a trustworthy person as well. And so it's been great. Like a partnership has worked really great. But like you need to like get into a conversation slowly with your partner. I'm sure you guys have talked about this and thought about it, but because breaking up a partnership can be ugly and can be difficult, so you just want to make sure, number one, you have common goals. Number two, you have a discussion about how you would get out of it. Like I think that's important, especially with family members. Like one of my first private money lenders, a person I borrowed money from, was probably my third private lender, was my grandmother. And my grandmother had some money. She came to me and said, I heard you talking at the Thanksgiving table about borrowing money from people to buy your real estate. I'd like to do some of that. And so I did that, but you have to really think about what the exit strategy would be if things go badly. And I would tell my grandmother, like, I know this would be sad if I got run over by a bus and something happened to me, or if I went crazy and I stopped, doing all this, but I want you to be taken care of. If that happens, here's what would happen. This property that you have a loan on, you'd have to go hire an attorney and take this property back and sell it. But here's the thing, like you're loaning me 70 cents on the dollar. So if this property is worth $200,000, you're not loaning me any more than $140,000 on this property, 70%. So if things go badly, that property might go down in value from 200 to 180 to 170, but hopefully you'd have enough room to then sell it because you've loaned me this lower amount of money. But you need to be prepared for that. And if you're not willing to take this property back and have to do that, don't loan me the money. Like, don't even get into this business in the first place. So I think that kind of conversation, like the worst case conversation, going to the end, going to like, what happens if we get pissed off at each other and we hate each other? How are we going to exit this thing? Like that's a good conversation to have. And I actually just did a partnership with somebody in your position, Justin, where you were the money. We were the money person with another investor who I trust and I like, and we have a property in Montana that we bought that's going to be an 8-unit boutique Airbnb hotel. It already is now. It's already up and running now. But we had a lot of these conversations within our partnership agreement, like, what would happen if this happened? What would happen if that happened? What happened if one of you died? Or what happened if you and your wife died? Because I don't want to work with somebody else. Like if you die, like we want to be able to take this property back, or this business back, and we want to be in charge. Like I don't want your heirs or somebody else to be in charge. So like those details that's kind of the downside of partnerships, is you need to go there. But the upside is that can then, if you have a lifelong partnership or a 20-year partnership, it's not the sum of your parts. 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. 1 + 1 equals like 10 or 20 or 100. It's like so much better. And that's just a long way of saying that, like, partnerships, I'm a fan. Like I think it can work. But if you're the person in your position, Justin, like you, the money partner, like the basic value proposition is, I put up the money. Maybe I put up all the money. Maybe I put 90% of the money, but typically it's like most of the money. The other person, their deal is they're usually bringing the deal. They're usually bringing the management of the deal. They're usually bringing, in your case, the remodeling. Like a lot of the value of a property that your brother could probably bring to the party is that he could remodel it. Like, so some of the best deals in real estate are the ones you have to fix up and change something or build or whatever. So like, you just want to have a discussion about that. Like, hey, I'm bringing the money, you're doing these things, and you just discuss what those things are. Like if he doesn't want to manage the property and you want to pay a manager, all right, let's just decide what that would be, and is that still a good deal for you? Paying a manager probably is, but you want to have that discussion about who's responsible for what, who's doing what. And once you have that like kind of sweaty palm difficult conversation, that's the hardest part. Like the front end is the hard part, but then once you get in the deal, you've already had that discussion, and then things can go really well, because you've kind of covered a lot of your bases. And for you, Justin, you now have an investment that somebody else is doing most of the work, and your goal compared to like investing in the stock market should be, you should get an outsized return for what the risk you're taking, the investment you're taking. And so in some cases you'll use leverage. Like if you wanted to, you could, your business partner and or you could go get a loan to buy the property, and you're putting the down payment plus the remodel money. Maybe that's one kind of typical scenario. But I've also had deals where we paid 100% cash for the property, and the benefit for us was we were getting like we got the income from that property. We might say the passive money partner gets like a 6%, equivalent of interest, but it's like a preferred return. Like the passive money partner put in all the money, and that's a lot of money, $300,000 to do this deal. So we're going to pay the first 6% of every year goes to the money partner, and then everything above that split 50-50, something like that. You can arrange it 100 different ways, but my point of like discussing all those minutiae and those details is a lot of times partnerships have a problem when one partner feels like they're putting in more than the other partner is, and it's not fair. And if the partnership's not fair, then there's going to be resentment behind the scenes. And so I like to always ask my partner, hey, is this fair? Like if it's not fair, like let's figure out a way to make it fair. And I've also had conversations where I had to go to my partner and say, hey, I put most of the work into this deal. We flipped it and made $30,000. Like, I think I need to get a little bit more. Like, let's pay me a $5,000 finder's fee since I did all the finding on this deal, and then we'll split everything above that. Like the point is, like, you just want to make it fair and like, just get those details off the bat, and then once you have all that set, like partnerships are strong because you're bringing something to the table that your partner doesn't have. Your partner's bringing something that you don't have, and together you're now going out into the marketplace, and you can get some really good deals.
Yeah, I love that. And just to get kind of into the weeds just a little bit, would you encourage somebody like me to like draft up like basically like an agreement that kind of formally lies out like everything, who's responsible for what kind of percentage payouts are done, and is there like an initial kind of like master partner agreement, and then like with each property like an additional agreement signed? Like how does kind of the more detailed aspects work?
Yeah, I would recommend starting informal. So like you kind of just get a piece of paper and just write down like, hey, this is what I think our partnership looks like, just between you and your partner. And maybe just do it in your own head first, the person with the money or the other person, to say like, I think if I'm putting up, a 30% down payment plus the remodel money, I think I need to have this, and this. Like, just put that on a piece of paper in your own words. Like, don't make it legal. Don't make it like all technical. Just do it so that you understand it and your partner understands it. And actually, I used to get really good at drawing pictures. Like, this is how my YouTube channel got started. Was I just like, I would draw these pictures. Like, here's a real estate transaction. Here's the seller. Here's a happy little face, and here's the buyer. And here's this arrow like showing how the transaction works. I was always explaining it to my business partners and my private lenders. And it was just like a natural thing to draw these stupid little pictures to like explain it. And they're like, oh yeah, that makes a lot more. Nobody's ever explained it to me that way. That's great. And so this kind of led to my YouTube channel. But I think that's the step you should take first, is that very informal. And then what the next step is, you take that informal kind of rough draft, and you can either do what's called a joint venture agreement, where you're just going to do one deal with your partner and that's it. Like that's kind of and so a joint venture is probably the best way to start. Don't get into a marriage yet. Just go on like get engaged. Like let's do the joint venture, just to say, we're going to try this out. And if this deal doesn't work, no harm, no foul. We'll just both go our own ways, but both of us have to be 100% on board to do the second deal. But let's do this first one together and start smaller. And a joint venture might look like you as the partner, Justin, who's putting the money up. Maybe you own the property yourself. So like you either you or through an LLC, like you 100% own this property. And then the entrepreneur they have an agreement that you're going to share the profits with them whenever this happens, whenever we sell it, whenever we rent it. But I think the money person should be in control. Like I always let my money people be in control whenever I was the new investor, because first and foremost, they need to get their money back. Like they're not going to do another deal with you if their money's not safe. And so it's reasonable for the entrepreneur to invest their time and risk losing their time. But you got to take care of the money person's money. Like that's just the number one. And so I would start with an informal agreement, and then like a joint venture, which could be like one person owning it, and then you just have an agreement between the two of you. And then the third, like more long-term commitment, which a lot of people do on the front end, but you could do it after the fact, is doing like an LLC, which is a limited liability company, and actually going to a local attorney, taking your rough draft and saying, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Attorney, this is what we think we want to do, but can you put this into legal terms, and can you translate this into a legal document? And they'll probably ask you a series of other questions you didn't even think of, like what happens when this happens. That's good. That's what attorneys are for. They're very creative and imaginative about worst case scenarios and all the crappy things that can happen in life. That's what my brother's an attorney, so I know this. I like to, hey, Andrew, what can go wrong in this situation? Tell me. And he'll tell me all the different things that I didn't think about. But that's what an attorney is for. There's more of a time cost and a money cost to going that route. That's why I say sometimes starting simpler with just a joint venture agreement is sometimes a better way to get started.
I absolutely love that. Okay, let's talk about some of the benefits of using financial independence to achieve or using real estate to achieve financial independence. So, you just came back from literally living in Spain for an entire year. So, help me and the audience understand, where did that initial like desire come from? How did you make it happen? And then what was that experience like? And then maybe after that, we can talk about like the reintegration back into the United States.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's where I am now. But it's very fresh in my mind because we just literally like a week ago came back from Spain. And the way this has started for me and my wife, and I have two kids now, a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old, is like the very first date my wife and I had. Actually, the very first pickup line I had with my wife had to do with like Spanish and studying abroad. Like we were in a yoga class, and of all places, it was me and the 70-year-old guy, and then like a room room full of ladies. Like I had good odds, So anyway, I met my wife, and my pickup line was like, oh, we were talking about what we do in town and or what why we were there, and she's like, oh yeah, I teach Spanish over at this community college. I was like, that's incredible. Like I want to learn Spanish. You're a Spanish teacher. We need to keep talking. It was basically that kind of line, and it was true though. Like I did want to learn Spanish, and I did. In our very first date, we talked about going living abroad and how she's traveled to Guatemala and Mexico a bunch. And I played football in college. I didn't have a lot of time to study abroad like I wanted to, but I studied German, and I traveled abroad to Germany. And so like that was the connection point for us, was let's do this. Let's travel. And so as we built financial independence, it was sort of something like I didn't want to wait until I was 50 or 60 or 70 to start doing this like this. So the allure of the financial independence movement for me was to have these incremental growth of your wealth such that you can then live off of that, so you can use it. And I read the book, The 4 Hour Work Week, back when I was like 25 or 26. And that hit me like a ton of bricks, because I was kind of on this, let's build a bunch of money and then I'll figure out what's going to happen after I build the money, get all the money. But he was like, in this book, he's like, no. Like you need to like, not just retire, you need to like distribute these quote retirement experiences throughout your entire life. Like don't wait. Like, why would you wait? And the metaphor for me is like you're climbing this mountain, and like full financial independence is the peak of the mountain. You know what? It might take, like, if you're super ambitious, that might be like a 7-year journey. It might be a 20-year journey though, or a 30-year journey to get to like full financial independence. So why would you wait until you're at the peak of the financial mountain to start enjoying life? And a practical way for us to do that was to take these little mini retirements where you commit to just like pressing pause on your business, pressing pause on your life. Sometimes early on, like in 2009, we did our first one, my wife and I did, before we had kids. We had to save up the money. Like we didn't have passive income coming in, or we didn't have enough of it because it was the middle of the recession and we were kind of paranoid that we were going to go out of business maybe. So we just saved up enough money, and we traveled to South America and Spain. We had our backpacks, and I learned to speak Spanish in Peru during that trip. And we traveled all sorts of cool places, Machu Picchu, and Patagonia, and Chile, and in Argentina. We went to Buenos Aires. And so that was like that. I got a taste of it during those 4 months, and I was like, oh my god, this is incredible. Like I want to do this again. And so it's always been like, let's go back and work to make more money and to build financial independence, so that we can do another one, and then another one, and then another one. And so the other ones for us, once we had kids, we went to Ecuador for 17 months, and we lived in Cuenca, Ecuador, when my kids were 3 and 5. And our kids learned to speak Spanish. They went to local schools. I went and I played pickup basketball and sports. That's kind of my way of connecting with people. So had a lot of amigos there in Cuenca that I played basketball with, and I got into tournaments with all them. My wife taught classes and took other sports that she did, and then so we got addicted again. Like, this is great. We came back to the U.S. and we did it again this year in 2022 and 23. We went to Spain this time, and moved to Granada, Spain, and we lived in we rented a house there. We rented our house in the United States and got income from our house in the United States that helped us pay for our house in Spain. But we also had income coming in from our other properties, and so the rental income paid for our lifestyle, and it was much more comfortable this time. Like the other times we went, the first time we went, we had to save up the cash. We were in Ecuador. We were kind of at a lean or a normal financial independence, so we paid for like a lifestyle, but it wasn't quite as easy. Whereas in Spain, like the money was coming in every month, the bank account fills back up, and we were able to really just live a very comfortable lifestyle. And I again played basketball. This time I also played soccer. My kids went to school again, and my wife had a lot of her activities that she likes to do, and taking classes and teaching English. So for us, I guess the point of all this is like those are the things that make a rich life for us. Those experiences. I particularly like Latin American culture, we do, and Spanish culture as well. Just the siestas, the focus on family and food and quality of life, the slowness of it, the fact that you have a meal. And I feel like part of the American lifestyle is this: you're always looking at your calendar and your watch, and you're going to the next thing, and everybody's in a rush. Like I hate that. Like it's part of me pushing back on my own A-type personality, is to say, you know what, like let's just take this slower. Let's take life slower. Let's take our day slower. Let's take our calendar slower. Let's not fill it up as much. And that's a luxury item. Like I feel like some people want to have yachts and planes. I want to have like a schedule that's not full and that goes as slowly as possible. Like that to me is like the ultimate luxury of 2023. And yet tons of people with money don't have that. That was one of my motivations for writing the book, is like, why is it that all these people with all this money in the United States in particular have zero time, and they're stressed and they're unhealthy? Like, why is that? Like, I don't get that. Like that, apparently there's another way of looking at wealth other than just money. Like maybe there's also, we need more time, and maybe we also need relationships. Maybe we also need, flexibility. And so that was part of my journey over the last, really since 2007, when I made that mistake that I opened up this whole conversation with, was like, how can I build a business model? How can I build an investing strategy that puts life first, that puts these ambitions we have to travel and study abroad or go abroad with our family? How can we start with that assumption and then have a rental property business, an investment portfolio that supports that and gives us the money, but also gives us the free time and the flexibility to make that all happen?
Yeah, I absolutely love that. I think this is why I think business, entrepreneurship, real estate, if you are wise, you actually use it as a source of personal development, because in the game of money, the default for just about everyone is more. And and that's like a life without reflection. Uh and if you slow down like you have multiple times in your life, doing these basically mini retirements, you actually realize that freedom, enjoyment, peace, and putting life first is really what you want your default to be. And so you proactively built a life that empowered that, and you started small. Like you had to first save the money to go do the first one, and then the second one you had some income coming in, so you went for like way longer, and you were able to take an even longer break. And then in this third one, like you lived, a fairly fit, rich life over in Granada, Spain. And I love that you are so introspective and kind of really made sure that along the entire journey, you were really focusing on what was most important to you versus getting sucked into, what you talk about in the book and what you've talked about on other podcasts, which is this like whole idea of like go big or go home. And I what I love so much about the book is again going back to that, putting life first. So you can go on a real estate entrepreneurial endeavor and you can still put life first. Does that mean there won't be periods of time where you're working really hard? No, like of course those will be there, but those will be more like shorter periods that are where the more populated parts of in any given year or any given set of couple years, you're having that slower, richer life. And so I really want to encourage the audience, like, go read this book, The Small and Mighty Real Estate Investor, because it is such an incredible way to pursue financial independence in a way that will give you like your fit rich life while you're on the journey versus, I think, unfortunately, and I'm pointing with my hands, a lot of people pursue financial independence where it's like nose to the grindstone, work crazy hard, save every fucking penny, like invest it into the stock market or whatever. And it's like life sucks for like 5, 10, 20 years. And then you finally hit financial independence and it's like now you're free. And that's like you just spent 20 years suffering in a life that you hate versus if you are a little bit more introspective and self-aware, you can actually enjoy the entire journey along the way and like get wealthier and wealthier and more free over time.
Well said. Yeah, and I think this is a realization a lot of people who were early kind of podcasters and influencers in the financial independence movement have all openly talked about this, or not, most of them. Like my friend Brandon at the Mad Fientist, people listen to that podcast, is very vocal about the fact that he went through exactly what you were just talking about, Justin, where he not nose of the grindstone. He learned one tool, and I'm pointing my finger as well, like save money, save money, save money, invest, and let's just be super, super frugal. Like that's cool. Like that's definitely a tool. The point of this though is not to say that you can't be happy and frugal. Like you can be. Like I think many times we're not creative enough to think about how we could be happier doing less, spending less. Like I think sometimes the default is just let's just go spend a bunch of money because that's what happiness equals. Like I think it's a good exercise to be frugal. At the same time, there's also some happiness to spending money. Like my wife and I are, yeah, the ultimate luxury is free time. The second ultimate luxury is amazing meals. Like when you sit with a great chef who produces like this amazing food that's just you've never tasted before, and different cultures have different types of food like that. I mean, what an amazing thing. Like pay up for that. Like spend your money on the food. Like who cares? Like that's what it's all about. If you can't spend money or even buy a meal for your friends, like, or pay for a round of drinks for your friends, like that kind of stuff, spending money actually can also bring you happiness. It's not the root of all your happiness, but to say the opposite is true, like money doesn't equal happiness, and to say don't spend any money, therefore, is not. It doesn't mean that you can't spend money and also be happy. So it's kind of I'm with you too, just like it's an experiment. Like I learned from getting burned. I have to touch the fire 2 or 3 times. Like you have to find your own spot. You have to find how much money is good for you. How much money do you need to spend? Try out frugality. Put those clothes on first. Try out spending a lot of money. If you've grown up poor and had very little money, like go live the rich lifestyle. Spend the money. Like buy the car. That's cool. Like it's fine to taste that. Like touch the fire. Figure out like where your happy spot is. But then at some point, the beautiful thing about mini retirements and this whole approach to not being waiting till you're into your life to live retirement is like you're testing it out. You're like experimenting. You're a scientist who's experimenting on what your ideal life looks like, and then the money is just working in parallel to help serve your lifestyle. It's just a tool. Like real estate, money, all that stuff is not the main thing. It's a tool that serves you. I have a picture. I did a little cartoon in the book where the go big businesses have this dog that's like pulling them along. It's like the business is on a leash and the dog is pulling them. That's the go big business. The business is running your life. The money's running your life. Whereas a small and mighty approach is to have this dog who's sitting, who's well disciplined, who's like serving your life, and who's not running the show. Like so that's the idea here, is that like money's great. real estate's great, but let's keep these parts, whatever it is that matters to you most. That's my t-shirt. That's what I always said. Do what matters. Like what matters to you first, and then let's work it backwards and let's figure out how to make that happen.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And one of the things that I want to really call out for the audience is the difference between using one tool or having an entire toolkit for your financial independence journey. And like that is you like slip that in there really like smoothly, but most people who they get like obsessed with one thing, like frugality, for example, or like, maybe they pair frugality with just like working their fucking face off. And then they sacrifice their health, and, they get the financial independence and they're overweight and they're unhealthy and their mental emotional state is terrible. Versus if you develop a set of tools that you can use, like pairing frugality with real estate, with entrepreneurship, with a 9 to 5, that like you can actually do this in a pace that is like really sustainable. Like you can take breaks, you can, take vacation, you can have money to spend on things that are truly important to your rich life, and it's different for everyone, like for example, for you, Chad, you mentioned just food, like in having that's really important to some people. For other people, it's like, going on like crazy trips where they get to like climb some, Mount Kilimanjaro or something like that. And that's going to cost a lot of time and money. And so, that's again kind of reflecting on the whole introspection thing. But I think developing a solid, well diversified toolkit to your money game, um, is incredibly important. Yeah. So basically, and I think the what I love about this picture is it applies to like the toolkit idea. If you just use one toolkit, like frugality could, and just for people who aren't watching the YouTube, basically it's what Chad said before. There's the owner who has a dog on a leash, and the small and mighty owner, he has the dog's just sitting peacefully, on the leash, and that's the rental business. Whereas the go big real estate investor, the owner is getting like dragged, like flying through the air by the dog, who's the rental business, who is just like taking him for this wild, like stressful, crazy ride of his life. And what I love about this picture is that could be frugality. The dog could be frugality. The dog could be, some other aspect of, only using one toolkit. So I just wanted to illustrate for the people who are watching on YouTube, and just kind of give a plug again for the book, because one of the things I mentioned to Chad in the opening before we hit record was this book is really accessible. It is like it's got pictures in it, it's got like headlines and bullets, and it's not like this super dense, hard to understand thing. It's packed with like just really clear, actionable, well organized, step by step processes that you can utilize to get into real estate no matter what circumstance you're in, what your income is, what you're, married or unmarried, kids or no kids. And I just, I really love the book because I've tried to read some books that are just like a, too dense for me to like be like, like screw this, like this seems too challenging. And the what I said to Chad was like the user experience, the UX on this, it's like it's awesome. It's like intuitive, it makes sense. So I just wanted to share for those who are watching on YouTube. And if you're listening, go ahead and just get the book. It's an investment that will be well worth your money. So transitioning into the kind of last section of the show that I want to cover is fitness, because you played football in college, and I know, talking offline, fitness has been really important to you. So can you kind of talk us through like how fitness adds to your overall like fit rich life?
Yeah, it's as I look back on it, like the fitness and athletics really has always been a key part of my life. Like that, when I was in middle school, actually, my big dream was to get a college football scholarship. And the reason, I think part of it was my dad played football in college. He went to Georgia Tech, and he used to take me to football games where we lived in Atlanta. And I was just like, wow, look at this stadium, look at all these people, look at the helmets and I mean, it was just like, there was just like a mystique about it for me, because it was just something I grew up with. And so that was kind of like, but it kind of got me into the world of training. And I used to do like Olympic power clean lifts, were kind of how I got started when I was in sixth, seventh grade, and kind of got into that. It was really good, kind of good leg strength, and use that to sort of, you know, lifting and as an athlete when you're playing football is sort of to get your full potential. Like I was someone who was pretty athletic, but you know, there's people who are more athletic, but I was always like, I pushed it, trained hard. And so working out, training was that kind of that for me for years. And I did it all through high school and college, mainly kind of a football oriented lifting where I trained. And then I also ran a lot. And I remember a time, though, very specifically when I was playing football and I thought I was going to go to the NFL right when I was done in college. And because I played 3 years, I started for 3 years at Clemson as a middle linebacker, about 235 pounds. And I thought I had a shot in the NFL. The scouts were telling me, but I really just kind of fell off my senior year. I had some injuries, and I had this moment when I was still out there training, and the heat in Clemson, South Carolina, it was like 95 degrees, 90% humidity. I was by myself running like wind sprints in June of like 2002, and I had this Forrest Gump moment where I like laid on the field, and I was like, I'm done now. I'm done. I just like, it was just like, it was like when Forrest Gump stopped running. I was like, that was me. Like, I'm done with football. I'm out of here. So like, I went right to the car. I had my cell phone. I called my agent, who wasn't going to help me much anymore because I didn't get hired on by any NFL teams, by the way. That's the end of that story. But I had a chance to play like Canadian football and arena football, but I was like, just, I'm done. Like, just, I appreciate your help, but I'm moving on with my life. And so that's been like, I went from like super hard training for years and years and years, like multiple, you know, a couple hours a day, to not doing that. And the transition for me is like, I started doing more just like body weight kind of lifting, and actually went to Germany for a month and a half, and I lost 25 pounds. Because I had, you know, the football frame and just mass, and I stopped doing that. I just did push-ups and walked everywhere. And I came back, and all the guys on my team were like, thought it was contagious. They're like, "Oh no, look at Chad! He's lost all this weight. He's got no muscle," and they were like running away from me, and it was hilarious. But I was like, I went from this kind of bulked up dude to this very skinny looking guy when I got back from Europe. But that's sort of been, I haven't, you know, my weight has not fluctuated much from that time. And when I was 23 and I came back from Europe, and that's when I got started in real estate too. So it's been like, fitness for me is just more of a part of my lifestyle. And I'm actually considering get back into training more. Probably need to talk to you about this offline as well, where I sort of just been doing pull-ups and push-ups, and I play basketball once or twice a week. I walk every day. I dabble with like, you know, handstand push-ups and things like that, but I haven't gotten back into a training regimen with like weights in a long time. It's just, I've kind of been on maintenance mode. So I'm actually interested in that just from a personal interest standpoint. I think I did it so intensely for so many years that I've kind of had not a revulsion, but it's like, I don't want to get back into that, the weight room, all that stuff. But I'm actually coming back from Spain now. I've got a little kind of piqued my interest again. I want to, I think early 40s, maybe that's part of it. Like, hey, wait a minute, like the metabolism's slowing down a little bit. This isn't as easy to maintain. I need to work this thing a little bit harder. I need to get back into training. So, but that's kind of like the financial stuff. It goes in seasons, and I'm excited. It's to me like the health part of it is like kind of like the money. Like, your body is here to help you have energy to enjoy those times with your kids, or if you have kids, or enjoy those times traveling, to be able to do functional fitness stuff like being able to lift boxes and not have your back like be, you know, hurt, or being able to run around, you know, out and play an ultimate frisbee game with some friends who want to do that and not be, you know, pull a hamstring. Like, functional use of your body is like what it's all about for me. And I think it's fun to have the goal. My goal is like when I'm 80 years old, I'd like to still be at age appropriately, still be doing active stuff. Like whether that means walking and biking, or whether that means, you know, some kind of sport. Maybe I'll be playing more pickleball at that point. Who knows? But like that to me is like fitness again, like money, is kind of serves your life and is a way to make your life richer as well.
Yeah. And I think, you know, one of the reasons I love kind of coaching fitness and money together is because there's just so many parallels, right?
Yes.
And I, just like there's seasons in your fitness, whether you're playing a sport or just kind of your overall fitness. Like, you went from a season of, being a football athlete to a season of, being more focused on calisthenics. And now you're like, maybe there's an opportunity for me to move into a new season where I start to combine some of the strength training that I used to do into my lifestyle to kind of power me through the next couple decades. And there's no right or wrong answer. It's just like it's really kind of what I always encourage people is like follow the fun and the fascination. Like if it sounds fun to get back into strength training and lifting, like heck yeah, do it. Does that mean you need to go 7 days a week for 3 hours a day? Absolutely not. You could do 2, 3, or maybe 4 days a week, and then the rest of the time you're walking and doing calisthenics. So absolutely love that. I just really love, Chad, how reflective you are in kind of your overall life philosophy, and you really do put life first because I think sometimes people, who can be overly focused even on fitness to the detriment of their relationship with their partner or, their kids. And the same thing happens with money and business. Like people get so focused on money and business to the detriment of their own health or their marriage or their children. So I think you've done a really fantastic job of really kind of checking in with yourself and that kind of philosophy. Excuse me, I almost choked there. That philosophy really kind of like plays through the book. So as we kind of
Thank you.
wind this down, of course, brother. Yeah. As we wind this down, I always like to leave the audience kind of with an actionable takeaway or like a leave behind. So, what is one tip, tool, or strategy for fitness, for money, and one for life that you would leave the audience with?
Yeah, what for fitness? And I don't remember where I heard this from, but it was really helpful for me. It was having a minimum viable workout. And this has been
Mm,
so helpful for me because when you travel a lot, right, you don't have your weights with you. And this is why calisthenics has probably been such a big part of my life is that somebody said, you need to have a workout that you could do if you only had like 5 or 10 minutes. And if you were in your hotel room, like what could you do? And the point is like you always do your workout. Like if you're somebody who exercises, you're the type of person who always exercises. Don't miss, like always do it. But the secret of that is not being like always doing the full workout. It's just having this minimum like workout you go to. So for me, I've dabbled with what I did there, but like every single day, I mean, I miss here and there, but like I'd say 98% of the time, I do some stretches I got from physical therapists for my back, just from old back injuries. Like I do like a sun salutation and I do some back bridges and then I do a couple burpees and I do some push up. Like it's just like I could do the whole thing in 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, but I'm warmed up, I'm stretched. I can do it in my hotel room. I take this workout with me everywhere, and it's one of these things. I've done this thing at 11:30 at night sometimes because I'm like, crap, I didn't do my workout today. Like I didn't do it, but I'm the type of person who gets my workout done, and you just get it done right there in the room before you go to bed. So that's my fitness tip, and it really applies to a lot of things. But if you have a minimum viable workout that you fall back to, and if you've never worked out, make it like one push up. I don't know, like one sit up. I don't whatever you want to do. Like just make it the easiest you could do so that you never miss, then you're pretty likely to stick with it at that point.
I
So that's
absolutely
yeah,
love that one.
yeah. I don't know if you want to comment on that, but I'm happy to jump into the money and life one too. But I figure you probably have more knowledge on the fitness side of things if you have some other feedback on
No,
that.
I think that no one said that on the show yet, and I absolutely love that because it's very similar to the go big or go home. It's like all or nothing. Like many people think, like if I can't go to the gym and do my exactly perfect, 45-minute workout with 5 different exercises that each have 3 sets, then I'm just not going to work out. Whereas with
Right.
the MVW, the minimum viable workout, it's like cool, I can't do my full workout, but I can take 10 minutes and I can bust this thing out and I can maintain a level of fitness that's significantly higher than the average person. So, hell yeah,
Yeah.
dude. Thank you for sharing that.
No problem. So on the money side of things, I think the idea is there's just this habit of paying yourself first that I always found really helpful. And this is the idea could kind of practically speaking be applied is that when you make money, and whether it's your job, whether it's like I was always an entrepreneur, so my money was very sporadic, but you have this idea that you always set aside money for yourself. And what I mean by that is this could be money. This is typically money to save. Like you're going to save money for retirement. So it could be just like automatically taking your money out of your salary and put it in your 401k. That's the one that everybody understands because that's what your job typically does. But like do the same thing with whatever else you're trying to save for. So my wife and I, when we first met, we got on like the whole, we don't do this anymore, but it was kind of fun and helpful early on. We did the whole cash envelope system where we would we set aside our money and put it into envelopes. Like here's grocery money, here's like the eating out money, here's all this. And so we spent all our money first. Like if we made $3,000 that month, we planned to make $3,000, we would spend 100% of that, including setting aside some money for savings for the long run. And the cool thing about that is when you pay yourself first or you spend that money first, then you learn to live on what's left over. Like that's all you got. Like that's what you have to learn. So you have to be. We are so creative. Like human beings, our minds are like amazingly creative. But if we don't give ourselves a creative constraint, we don't give ourselves barriers and boundaries, we don't use our creativity. It's easy with money just to be lazy. It's easy with like your fitness to be lazy too. So you got to give yourself constraints. And I think paying yourself first, spending that money ahead of time is like one of the best hacks I've had for money.
Love it. Yeah. No real additional comments other than like whether it's, investing, and I tell people like, even if you can only invest like $25 a month, like just do that because there's a snowball effect. It's like, oh, I invest 25 a month. Then a few months down the road, you're like, oh, I can invest 50 now. Okay. And then like a few months after that, it's like, oh, I could put 200 away. And then eventually
Right.
you become the type of person that invests every single month. And you become the person who, oh shit, I have like 5,000, 10,000 invested. Year later, oh my God, I have 30,000 invested. Like I'm an investor. And that just like snowballs and compounds over time. So I really love that one.
Yeah, we've got a theme going here. Minimum viable workout, minimum viable payment, whatever we want to call that. Minimum viable investment. All right, good. I don't think I have a theme on the third one, but my life when I'm kind of obsessed. I think it started with sports, but I've also in kind of my post sports life, I've been really obsessed with just personal development and whether it's studying coaches, whether it's studying historical people. I'm really into the Stoics, like philosophy wise. And there's been some common themes that I found in a lot of these different places I've studied. And it kind of comes down to like worrying less about what other people think of you and your reputation and worrying more about who you actually are, like your character, like the person you are inside. And to me, that's kind of the name of the game. Like, and this is something I struggle with, by the way, too. Like, I think we all do. Like, we do worry about what other people think about us. We're sort of hardwired with that. We're social creatures. Like, I think our evolutionary kind of life is that our brains are built to worry about what the tribe thinks about us. And yet, it's one of the biggest obstacles to us growing and becoming the best person we can be. And I see this whole thing, the money, the fitness, the playing sports is all, it's a really good metaphor for being your best self. And to me, that's the ancient Greeks and the Stoics called that arete, like being your best, like is excellence. Like it's every single moment, every single day. Like it's like you have this measurement system that only you can measure. And this is your potential up here. This is where you could be. And arete, or being your best, means like how close am I getting to being my best? And sports and exercise are so beautiful because it's like they push you to do that in the physical realm, and they teach you that you can do a lot more than what you thought you could do. Like you could push it. Money's the same way. Like money and business, like if you just look at it by itself, like it's it's not an end in itself, but it can teach you that wow, you could start with zero money or even negative net worth and end up with millions of dollars and have this financial independence. Like amazing. But you, the person, had to grow to do that. And so I think that's been in my best moments. I'm not perfect with this either. And I appreciate your compliments on being self-reflective, but a lot of that again is touching the fire. And the more the reflection I have is like, oh shit, I just bumped into a wall, or oh shit, I just made a mistake. And let me step back and like, lick my wounds because I just did something stupid again. Like that's more my self-reflective style. Like I think that's a form of meditation too, is like being burned by doing stupid stuff and then learning from it. But that's the beauty. That's the fun part of life. Like life's a game, and we are here to get better and to improve ourselves. And whatever The Stoics used to say like you don't get to choose like what role you're playing in this game of life, but you are here and you get to play like, and you get to play your role. Do it the best you can. Play your role well. And happen to be a father, happen to be a husband, happen to be a real estate investor, happen to be a teacher and a podcaster now. And my game that I feel privileged to get up and play every day is like, let's be the best I can be. Like let's do this. Let's have fun. Let's try to improve my skills as a podcaster and learn from people like Justin, and try to up my game and get a better mic and get a better system. And let's up my game as a physical person and try to get a better routine. Like, I don't know, that's just the way my brain is wired. I think that's a ton of fun. And if I could be 85, 90, 100 years old, still doing that kind of game, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah. I absolutely love that one. And I think there's a nuance that I've really been thinking about a lot, and it's being the best you, because you can't be the like best at everything or even one thing, because there's always going to be somebody that's better at, like, there's always going to be someone richer, someone fitter, someone who has a nicer house, but there's nobody, like there's no other Chad coach like Coach Carson. There's only like you, like, and you have such a unique story. You played football in college, you like got into real estate and like hustled, crazy, and bought 32 properties in a freaking year. And I think in this, like, it's not just like Chad who's super unique. It's every single one of us has such a unique upbringing, journey, life, and we all have these beautiful strengths. And for example, for Coach Carson, like, he's really good at real estate, and he's really good at like making sure that he enjoys the journey along the way. And so like now he shares this brilliance, this like best version of himself with the world. And I think really everybody has this opportunity to become the best, like you, or the best, like whoever's listening, like the best you, and then you're able to offer yourself in service to other people. And so I really love this, kind of this life advice that you're leaving us with, because there's only one Chad Carson, there's only one Coach Carson, but that doesn't mean that like everyone listening to this can't have their own incredible journey and story, where they really not only serve themselves, but eventually go on above and beyond themselves and serve others with their own brilliance. So, Chad, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you for your questions. You're doing an awesome job with your podcast of bringing these things out. I really, really enjoy it.
Awesome. Yeah. So as we kind of shut this down, I wanted to, Coach Carson and I decided that we are going to do a giveaway for the listeners. So if you want a rental property calculator, I am going to send it out to all of my newsletter readers. So the Fit Rich Life newsletter, every week I share a short actionable email that shares a tip, tool, and strategy for fitness, for money, and for life. And many of these I get from guests or clients of mine. So in the next two issues, on Sunday, August 13th, and Sunday, August 20th, I will put a link to this rental property calculator that Chad Carson is going to give to us. So you can sign up for the newsletter at fitrichlife.com/newsletter, or you can just send me an email, justin@fitrichlife.com. Let me know that you want to be on the newsletter and you want the rental calculator, and I'll send it to you. So definitely go check out Coach Carson's book, The Small and Mighty Real Estate Investor. It's an incredible book. Like I said, super user friendly. Coach Carson, where's the best place for them to go get that right now?
Yeah, so if you're listening to this right when the episode comes out, it's just available on Bigger Pockets. So we'll have a link in that, I'm sure, in the description, the show notes. And that's if you go to biggerpockets.com/small and mighty. that's the best place to get it. There's also a lot of bonuses with that. It's kind of, I made a bonus chapter called Small and Mighty Investing in a Changing Economy. So talking about how do you do this with higher interest rates? How do you do this when prices seem to be going out of control? Like, so there's just a unique aspect of where we are in the market. So that was a bonus chapter. And then I also have a pretty cool thing. It's like an agenda that shows what my schedule is like today, like the 2 hour work week, and how much time I spend on real estate, what I do with that, what I spend with the rest of my time. And then there's this exercise for you to do the exercise yourself and create, like, what does your ideal day and week look like, and how would you like to fit in if you had 100% of the time or all but 2 hours per week available to do other stuff? How would you spend your time? And so those are the kind of bonuses you get if you go to Bigger Pockets. But then there's an audiobook, there's a digital version, and then there's also a physical book. And then after August 22nd, it'll also be available on Amazon, on Audible, Barnes and Noble. So anywhere you find your books, you'll be able to check it out there as well.
Great. We'll put links to everything in the show notes. Coach Carson, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate your time, your energy, and all the brilliance you shared with me and the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Really enjoyed it. And I hope everyone listening found it helpful. It's great talking to you.